We're going to turn this shelf into this micro layout. It fits into 9.5 by 24 inches, is based on a 1904 prototype, has a station, grain mill, and excelsior factory. No switches, only this turntable I designed and 3D printed that eliminates shorts and routes power automatically. Oh, and I worked out the math so you can design your own. Why are we using a turntable? This is the traditional inglenook switching layout, and while it's 8 cars on the layout, to build a 5-car train gives a lot of variety, it doesn't even remotely fit into our 24 by 9.5 inch micro layout space. This is the plan in the traditional form of 2 spurs off of a main line that fits in our space. Well, almost fits. It can only manage 6 cars on the layout to build a 3-car train, which limits us to 120 combinations. Not much variety at all. If we rotate it a bit, maybe it'll fit. Nope, still doesn't fit. We'll just give it a pass. This is our plan with the turntable. It fits 7 cars on the layout to build a 4-car train, which includes 1 car on the turntable. It has 840 different train combinations, 7 times the playability of the traditional format that fits in this space. The turntable. Let's take a look at our turntable. We start with the turntable bridge itself. Next, we need a way to turn it. We're going to use a worm drive. Here is the worm gear, and on the turntable, we're using a gear. Technically, this should be a worm wheel, but a standard gear will work, and because FreeCAD generates it for us, it's a lot easier than drawing a worm wheel from scratch. Now we need to deal with power. We need a way to power the rails on the turntable itself, but the bigger problem is dealing with the polarity if we spin the turntable 180 degrees. We could use switches, but that creates a confusing mess. We either switch the polarity on the turntable, which then means we have to reverse the direction on the power pack to keep the train moving in the direction we thought it was going to go. Or we can switch the polarity on the rest of the layout, which means we need to keep track of which way the turntable is facing at the beginning and end of a move, and figure out whether we need to flip it or not. Both take more brain power than solving the puzzle of building the train. Instead, we're going to use the turntable itself to automatically route the power to the rest of the layout, so we never have to think about it and can concentrate on solving the puzzle. We use 2 contact plates to do this. One is fixed to the layout, supplies power from the power pack, and has connections to all the tracks on the layout. Let's take a little closer look at it. These inner tracks supply the power, and these outer tracks route it to the tracks. The other is attached to the turntable and rotates with it. It picks up power from the fixed plate and routes it to the turntable track and contacts that line up with either end of the turntable bridge. The last thing we need is something to house it all, and that's this body. It's got brackets to support the worm wheel or the worm gear. It's got a bottom locating bearing for the turntable itself. It's got features that locate both of the plates, and it lets us attach the whole assembly to the layout. So now we're going to wire this, and we're going to start with the fixed section. So we'll start this up from the bottom. And try to get this to lay down in this track. I'll clip that puppy off right about there. Let's start by putting some super glue in here and seeing what we can get done. Now let's see if I can hold this down without gluing my fingers. There, that looks like it's stuck on. Now we'll do this track the same way. Now we've got the inner track's power supply on. We're going to do one of the outer supplies to kind of show how that goes. So these just go up. They go over. So that's where it's going to bend. So now we've got it up. We'll bend it. So that'll fit down in there. We'll put a little bit of super glue in here. Or a lot of bit of super glue. That's a lot. Push that down. There we go. So now we're going to do the same thing with each one of these, and that'll be our fixed part routing the power out to the track. Now we're going to do the turntable contacts, and we're just going to take a strip of copper, and it will get inserted through. Then the same kind of bending. And now we're not going to bend this to be flush. We won't make our mark right here. We're going to put it like there because we want these to be a little springy. If that makes any sense. If I can grab it. I need something round to stick in here and to give it a little pre-curve. Yeah, a little bit like that, so we've got a little bit of a curve. There we go. So that is what we're looking for. Can you see that? Yeah. So we've got a little bit of a bump on it, and then this will come down, make contact with our pieces down here. So now we're going to do the rest of these, and we'll come back when they're done and show you the finished product. We're done with the turntable contact. These are going to get epoxied down on one side after I solder lead wires onto them. I'm going to finish up wiring the turntable portion of it. So we need to put this down, heat it up. Fortunately, it's cold, so it doesn't take long for the solder to freeze back up. Okay, we're wired up. I need to glue these down, but the key thing is the inside goes to the inside here, but the inside has to go to the outside on the opposite end. Now we're going to glue down our contacts. Just a little epoxy under each contact. Hopefully I've got them cleaned up enough. Get the flux cleaned off from soldering. There we go. Let that dry. Completed. Let this dry, then we'll start assembling. This is the finished turntable mechanism. I'm going to take you through all the steps we did on the way. This was our original contact plate with the solid copper contacts. I couldn't get it to make consistent good contact. I made another one, and this one it's a little difficult to see, but I molded features to try to keep each contact at the same height. This one didn't work either. Now these would have probably worked if these were stamped parts and they were all exactly the same, and I could have actually engineered them, but I was cutting out of pieces of copper I had and they didn't work. The next trial was some braided wire, thinking we'd have a lot more pieces for contact here and it would be a little flexible. This had the same problem. It would have intermittent contact. So what we did for the final version, and here it is all together, so we can see it. Turn the wheel, turntable turns, and I've tested this one. It works pretty well. We'll take the gear off of here. Here's the key. These contacts, number one, there's a little molded feature in here, a little spring to keep them at the same height in the same position, but the big thing was using this braided copper. I forget what it's called. It's for desoldering, right? You put flux on it, heat your solder up, and it wicks up into this. This works very well. There's a lot of individual strands on there to make contact. It's very soft and flexible, so the little molded features keep it right where we want it. This is the final version. It's working very well. So this is ready to go into the layout. Obviously, the turntable itself needs some detailing and the track, but the mechanism itself works great now. Final assembly of the turntable. We're going to start by putting some weights on the bottom. I want to make sure there's enough force pushing down on it to ensure we have good electrical contact all the time. So hopefully those will stick. These are just weights for balancing wheels, automotive tires. So this is just a plain FDM print, and because it's structural, and FDM's a little bit better for being structural than resin, but I want some detail on it. So we printed out some resin parts. Here's a deck and 2 side plates. So this is really cool. don't know, can we get the detail on this? There we go. This was super easy, and it's amazingly detailed. I'll add a little segment in here maybe to show how I did this. So that looks pretty good. And we'll put on one of our sides. Pretty good. Here we go. I say this looks a lot better, a lot more detailed. Now we're going to paint this. We're done painting and weathering the turntable. It's quite a change from the bare FDM functional piece, structural piece we had before. And I used the Vallejo wood weathering kit for the deck. There we go. I don't know if you can pick up that detail, but it's amazingly detailed, at least to me. Assembling the turntable. Step number one is we have to have our gear in place because it can't fit in once anything's on the top. Then step two is gluing this in. And it's going to have to go, the alignment's pretty critical because we want the shaft to come out the front and we want the, these connectors determine the direction of the tracks. So we want this fairly well centered in there. And there's a little ledge here. So we'll keep our gear in here. There we go. Now the next thing is we've got to position this plate. No, you know what I should do? Okay, that's good. I got to go back and route these wires up through the deck on the turntable. We're going to drill holes to feed the power wires, the leads, up to the track on the turntable. And this is roughly 10 millimeters apart. If we drill right next to the base, it should roughly come up on the outside of the rails and give us the cleanest, minimalist installation. You can see those holes line up pretty well with the track. Now we'll go on and assemble the turntable. Now we're mounting the movable contacts to the turntable itself. Now we're going to have to stick it through everything. Man, what idiot designed this? There we go. I don't know if we can see in there. Need to line this up. There. Now let's do the actual gluing. Now I wanted to show this real quick. I did find an issue, and it's got to do with the worm gear. So when we go this way, it's fine. But when you go clockwise, viewed from the top, can you see the way it pushes the turntable up? So that means I have to kind of come back to suck it back down, and I'll explain why that happened and how we're going to fix it. So, if we look straight on from that view, you've got the worm gear and the worm wheel. This is just a gear. And if you look from the side, the worm gear it's got threads on it, right? And those engage with the teeth, and that's what moves the wheel. When it turns this way, it's going to push up on the gear, right? Because the tooth is going to be there, this is going to go that way, the slope's going to push it up. And when it turns this way, it's going to be pushing on the gear from this side, going like that, and it's going to push the gear down. So the way I would fix this is at the bottom of the shaft on the turntable, I would put a little bearing surface like that. And if we look at it from a solid view, put a slit up between the two sides so that this can bend. And then on the base, we would just put an undercut to capture it, right? So this will bend in. A horrible drawing. But this will bend in, allow it to snap in, and then it'll retain it, and it'll hold it down to prevent that motion when you turn one direction versus the other. I'm not going to do that in this one because we're already too far along. It's all assembled, painted, weathered. We're just going to go forward, but there is a simple way to fix this, and that is it. Prototype inspiration. We have the turntable and the track plan. Now it's time to start building the layout itself. The inspiration comes from this island in 1904. There are three main things on the island: a train station, a grain mill, and some warehouses. We're going to substitute an excelsior factory for the warehouses, but these will be the three industries on our layout. Let's start modeling them. I designed and 3D printed all the structures to fit them in our tiny footprint. This is the station. I swapped the prototype for a smaller one that better fit the space from Minocqua, Wisconsin. This station is a great choice because it was a prime vacation spot for Chicagoans arriving on the Milwaukee Road's iconic Hiawatha streamliner that ran between those points. The prototype is still standing today. After passenger service ended, it spent decades as a local landmark, Billy Moy's One World Inn. While the restaurant is a neat story, the original station, in its setting amongst the falls, is an even better one. We're substituting an excelsior factory for the warehouses. I had never heard of excelsior until I saw the factory on this map. Turns out it was a very versatile material made from wood in the early 1900s. Fine shavings of wood used in boxes and crates like packing peanuts and like polyfill and stuffed toys. I had no luck finding pictures of the actual factory, but from the maps it's clear fire was a major concern. The storage areas were separate from the factory itself, and the factories were clad in corrugated iron while the powerhouses were universally made of brick. So that's what we did in our artistic license version. An excelsior factory is a great addition to a logging layout. It can be the customer of a sawmill or a logging operation, and as this map shows, it can be an intricate and complicated interconnected set of structures, adding huge visual interest, not to mention being a conversation starter. The mill, in addition to being important to the local community, is also the key to our layout. The turntable right here is what inspired the whole idea. The first thing you notice is the turntable is right in the middle of the spur. It appears to be a stopgap measure to serve the mill, as the tight confines of the island don't leave room for a turnout or even a curve on the track to reach the mill while also serving the warehouses. This is borne out by this later map showing a separate turnout serving the mill, but it starts in the middle of a bridge, which is a considerable undertaking. The classic problem of making things work in the space you have. In this case, the prototype and modeler face the same challenge. The thing you might not notice is the turntable is only long enough to hold a single car based on the map. So my guess is the train dropped off a car, which was moved to the mill using a team of horses, then back again when it was full. Now is the moment of truth. We're going to glue this puppy in. I've centered the turntable kind of between the edges of where the straight through contact is made. So to give us the most variation, and then I've marked the center line of it. We're going to glue it in place. And I don't want to use a whole lot of glue. Hopefully just enough. So that looks pretty good. Now we're going to put the crank on. But we're going to use a little drop of super glue on the end. Shot of accelerator. No. There we go. We soldered the leads onto the turntable track and the power distributing leads from the turntable to each track. I used my hot wire cutter to carve a slot for each wire that comes out under the turntable floor. Here is the finished layout. But before we test it and see how well it works, I'm going to give you the cheat sheet on how to design your own switching layout that makes the most of the space you have. The design rules. Rather than blah 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 the rules, let's use them to find the most complex puzzle we can fit in our 24 by 9.5 inch space. We need to know how many spaces we have to start. On this track plan we have 16. 4 on each long spur, 1 on each short spur, and 1 plus the loco on the turntable. Rule number 1. There has to be at least as many open spots as the longest spur, or some puzzles will be unsolvable. For us, that's 4. Rule 2. The length of the locomotive must be accounted for in a section that moves between the spurs. For us, that's the turntable. 3. The total number of cars is the number of open spots minus 1 to allow moving. For us, that's 11. 4. The length of the train is the length of the longest spur, or that plus 1 if you use the section that moves between spurs. For us, that's a 5-car train. Now the math part. The number of combinations is the number of cars factorial divided by the difference between the number of cars and the train length factorial. If you don't know how to calculate a factorial, you can just get the two numbers and ask Google. For us, that gives 55,440 combinations. Using these rules, we've come up with a railroad that has 11 cars that build a 5-car train for 55,440 combinations, over 7 times as many as the original inglenook layout that doesn't even fit in this space. So to run this layout, the first thing we need is something to represent each car. In this case, a bunch of cards. And we take the cards, shuffle them up, and then we draw 4 cards to make our train. We've got the white one, the red one, the green one, and the black one. So now we want to make that train in that order, and we'll say this is left to right behind the loco. So this is the end, this is the beginning. Here's where all the cars are at the start, and at the bottom of the screen, the train we have to build. Okay, I'm going to mulligan that. I have a problem with which direction is slower and which direction's faster. Now we're going to move this guy over to here. It doesn't help that this is kind of a janky little locomotive. A few things will become apparent as we run this layout. The first is the little Bachmann switcher from eBay isn't a good runner. It has 2 speeds, stopped and full blast. Now, we'll turn this around. That's good right there. Make sure it's uncoupled. Drive back to the middle. Okay, now we're going to pick up the white car. And I am going to cheat a little bit because these couplers don't like mating. They're 2 different kinds. This is the second issue. The cars have microtrains couplers, and the locomotive has an easy mate coupler, which do not mate well. This will come to a head a little later. Oof. Oh, he's got a little traction problem here. Good. Beautiful. Put him at the head. So we're going to turn. I don't think this one's on the tracks. Ooh, there, did it again. That was 100% me. Now, we're going to push this guy to the head of our train. A third issue is the left side of the turntable is always higher, and I'm not sure why. It's not the foam, or the turntable base, or the bridge, as it's always the left side. Possibly the worm is too close to the gear and loading it to the right. If you have any ideas, let me know your theory. This led to each track being a different height off the foam, which compounded into less precise track work than I would like. So there's a little contact problem here. Now, what do we got? We need to get that green car. The last issue is all the cars that aren't Denver and Rio Grande are completely 3D printed, including the trucks, wheels, and couplers. They work, but not super well. Oof. Okay, we've got that one there. Again, my horrible coupler mismatch. Why did this kink up? Because this coupler. Okay, I see the issue. So let me show you what the issue is. This coupler doesn't mate with any of the car couplers. These are 3D printed. They're copies of Microtrains couplers. This coupler is something I bought from the hobby store, and they're about twice as big, and I had to retrofit them onto this locomotive so they're not well positioned. There's a lot of slop in them. So it pushes so far to the side that it just keeps derailing that car. But we got it on the spur. Let's uncouple that. And that's going to stay there for the rest of the time. Switch them the way we want them to go. Again, my janky couplers. Now, oof. And again, we shoved it off the track with our couplers. Time to finish our switching. There we go. Hooked up. Okay, we're out of traction with our little train. We solved the switching puzzle and have our train built in the right order. It was a lot of fun despite the teething problems and worked great for our first take on this concept. Now let's see if our little loco can actually pull the train. On screen is either a video showing the super simple but effective tricks I use to model the buildings, or a video YouTube knows you'll like. Nope, it's trying. It's a little train that couldn't.